Hello, and thank you all for attending. Today, we're going to be talking about connecting RoboHead with different departments that might be using different systems. Specifically, we're going to set up an example here where JIRA issue has been moved to a new status or created in a new status, and that's going to send a new request to RoboHead for approval. So let's start now by taking a look at just a blank RoboHead account. This is set up under the request queue, the approver queue. We've got no options currently sitting in there. Nothing new, just letting you know that this is blank. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over to JIRA. Again, very simple setup. This is just using one of JIRA's standard templates. I'm sure if you are familiar with this, if you have other departments that use JIRA, it probably looks a little bit more complex. But keeping things simple just for the sake of ease of following. So we do have an issue created under this email blast off project. We've got an issue of email formatting needed. If we click on that, it brings up the email information. We've got descriptions, we've got assignees, we've got a priority and due dates and start dates and different information. So the zap that we have set up is set to take place when an issue is created underneath the concepting status. Now, this works both when you move something underneath there or when you create something directly under that status. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this existing issue and we're just going to move it over under concepting. Now, this is going to take a moment for things to work in the back end for that to send it to Zapier for Zapier to create the request. So while that is working, let's take a look at the Zap itself that is set up. So if we take a look, this is just the simple Zap that we've created inside of Zapier. Some of you may be seeing Zapier here for the first time. Things can get a little bit more complex. Well, they can get a lot more complex than this, but again, keeping things simple, keeping things straightforward. So what we're doing here is the very first thing that we're doing in Zapier is we are going to want to know what we're going to be triggering this off of. So in the setup, we're just going to choose an application. Zapier has a lot of different applications to choose from. We chose JIRA. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to trigger off an event. So what is the event that we're looking for here? Well, the event we're looking for of the ones that are available is a new issue. So this is when a new issue is created or when a new issue is moved into a status in JIRA. And then underneath that, we just have to authenticate to the account with our credentials, and we've already done all of that. The next step here is a pretty simple one on this side, is to configure any filters or any restrictions that we want for this setup. Now, we're not going to choose a project because we don't want to limit this to just one specific project in JIRA, so we're going to leave that blank. It's going to apply to all projects, but what we do want to limit it to is concepting. We only want this to trigger if that issue is created in the status of concepting. So that's what we've got in here. And then there's really no other options here. This is all that we can filter on for the trigger in JIRA. The test is just to test for the options. It'll pull in information, let you know if the connection went through, let me know if it pulled in good information, and we can kind of go from there. So after we've tested good and we've pulled in some information, we know that we're talking to JIRA, then we set up what we want it to do. Now this part here is very similar. We choose the app from Zapier that we want the information to go into. In this case, we want RoboHead. And then we're going to choose the action. We want this, and we could have it create a note, we could have it create a project, but we're just going to have this create a new request. And then likewise, this is the account that we want that to be pulled into. You have to authenticate into it. That's already been taken care of. So moving over to the configure option, this gets a little bit more interesting. So these options here are the fields that will be on your request form in RoboHead. You'll notice that some of them have little red stars like that, and those are going to be required fields. So probably, project name, project start date, project due date, maybe some other information in there if you need it would have to be filled out. You would need some type of value in there in order for that request to actually be created in RoboHead. And now the nice thing in here is, so for this information, we want this to be filled in automatically from whatever was in JIRA. So for the project name, you would click on this little plus icon and you're going to get a bunch of different options. And so we've already scrolled down, we've already found the project name option. And so we're just going to use the project name that's in JIRA as the project name that's in RoboHead. Now there are, you can see a lot of different options here. So these are fields that are on the back end in JIRA, and even I don't know what each and every single one of these does. The information that you see in gray afterwards is stuff that it's pulled in from that test. So this isn't necessarily the information that's going to show up every time you create a Zap, but it's the information that was in there for the test that it pulled. It gives you a little bit of a reference. You can see what's going on. You can see what fields had things filled out and kind of know what's what from there, because some of these aren't very descriptive, but if you know the value, then you can understand, well, okay, so the status name is concepting. We know that the status in JIRA was concepting, so that's likely what that is. But we just went through here and, so for project name, we chose the project name that was in JIRA. Makes sense. You could choose something else if you so desire. You can put static values in here as well. You could, put in from JIRA, it's this project. It just would need to be filled out. The next field down here is the description field in RoboHead, and for this one, I've chosen a few different options. So I've chosen the text that is in the issue that was put in, the basically kind of the little description there that people put in. I've put in the priority. I've pulled that from the issue in JIRA, and I've pulled the summary, which is the issue name that was in JIRA. We can add in more information if we want. You could type in, again, something just static here if you wanted. And this will all be in the request then when it's created in RoboHead. As you can see, you can scroll down the list here. We've got different fields that we can use, project type. These are all just standard ones from the forms when a thing is created. So you can match other fields, like if you have a specific status or client that is in the JIRA ticket, you could put that in for the value in RoboHead. The tricky part there is going to be that they do have to match exactly. So whatever the value is in JIRA would have to be exactly what the value is in RoboHead. There are a few ways to get around that, but that gets into much more complicated filtering and configuration and manipulation of the data as it's transferred across. So the other required fields here that are going to be required for the request form are the start date of the request and the due date. So for those, I just chose the date that the issue was created in JIRA, and I chose the due date that was put in for the issue in JIRA. And then likewise, you can scroll through. There's, like I said, all of these are all of the fields that are on the request form. And then once you've got things filled out as you want, you would continue on to the testing phase of it, where it would actually try to create a request, see if everything went through, see if there were any errors, give you that information. And then if it tests good, we've got a little checkbox. This is already tested good, and we know that the Zap is good to be enabled. If it doesn't, then there are some things we need to fix. We'd see the errors, we'd be able to update and make changes. So it's been more than enough time. This has all been inputted and saved, and the Zap is turned on, so this should all be working. And let's go back to our RoboHead account here, and we're going to refresh the approver queue. And look at that. So in here now in the approver queue, we have this request that was sent over from JIRA. The request name, this was the project name that was in JIRA. We've got the description that was in JIRA. We've got the status. We've got the issue name, just like we said. And then we've got the planned start date here is the date that it was created, and the due date is the date that was then in JIRA. So this is now just a request in RoboHead. You can go ahead and use the request actions. You can approve the request, create it from a template, just like you would for any other request that's been entered. Apply the schedule from the template, the reviews that you have set up in the template, and just create it as a request from RoboHead. Now these will come in underneath the, you know, when you set up the authentication in Zapier, you are going to be basically using an account in RoboHead. So these Zap requests will all come from the same user. We're generally going to recommend that if you do something like that, you create a Zap specific user that all of these can come in. So if you see that user, you know that it came in from the Zap. You can definitely use an account admin's email address, but that can definitely get pretty confusing as far as who's creating what. So just to keep things a little bit separated, a little bit more organized, we would often recommend that you create a specific Zap account that you use when you're setting these things up. So hopefully that's been enlightening, and people have learned a little bit. Maybe thinking of something that you might be able to use interdepartment in your own systems. Uh, Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.